In this Advent season, we will read Annunciation stories. We will follow a newly published lectionary, the Women's Lectionary for the Whole Church by Reverend Dr. Will Gaffney. In most Annunciation stories, heavenly messengers appear to unsuspecting women and prophesy about the importance of the child which already is or soon will be in their womb. If you think about it, pregnancy is the perfect symbol for Advent. The babies are already here, but not yet among us, already made, but not yet known to their parents or anybody else. Not yet. The time of waiting, growing, and expecting. Waiting for God to be born as the Christ child. We will meet a variety of women and learn about them and their sons to be. Hagar, Ishmael's mother. Sarah, former Sarai, the mother of Isaac. Samson's mother, whose name is not mentioned. Hannah, who gives birth to Samuel. Elizabeth and her son John, later known as the Baptist. And Mary, the mother of Jesus. Childlessness is an affliction of biblical proportions for those who feel called to be parents, but cannot. Sarah and her husband Abraham, former Abram, Samson's mother and her man Manoah, Hannah and her partner Elkanah, Elizabeth and Zechariah. For Mary, on the other hand, the pregnancy comes unexpected and far too early. She's not married yet. This child, the heavenly gift, has the potential to bring big trouble into her life. And Hagar? She had no choice in the matter. As a slave, she was used by her mistress Sarah, her master Abraham, to conceive and carry a child on their behalf. A child long awaited and cherished by Hagar's masters, at least in theory. In practice, Ishmael will be discarded at the soonest possibility. Already in the time of Hagar's pregnancy, Sarah and Hagar are struggling with the two wives situation. Sarah abuses Hagar so much that Hagar flees into the desert. This is where we meet her in the reading, sitting at a rare well of water in the midst of the desert. In the Bible, the desert is a place prone to self-discovery and God discovery, prone to spiritual encounters and experiences. Just imagine yourself in the vastness of the desert, all the shades of sand, browns and yellows, plains and hills and mountains, a landscape without end, without borders. A landscape which challenges the boundaries between heaven and earth, between truth and vision. What is this over here? A bush which is burning but not being consumed by fire? This is where Moses found God, and where God gave Moses his task to liberate the enslaved. And what's that over there? Are those stones or is this bread? The fragrance of freshly baked bread. How must this be filling Jesus' imagination after he has been fasting for 40 days? And yet, Jesus resists the temptation by the devil in the desert, who offers him a life of riches and power if he only steps away from his calling to bring the good news and to save the world from exactly the hybris, greed, and selfishness the devil promotes. And here is Hagar with Ishmael in her womb. She is resting at a well, precious water in the dryness of the desert. Apparently, the messenger of God has been looking for her, for the Bible text tells us that this godly person finds Hagar at the well. Hagar, slave girl of Sarai, from where have you come and where are you going? They ask. From my mistress Sarai am I fleeing, Hagar responds. It is now revealed why God was looking for Hagar in the desert. God has plans for Hagar and Ishmael. And for these plans to be fulfilled, Hagar needs to go back to her mistress first. The messenger does acknowledge the abuse she suffers. They say, "Look, you are pregnant and shall give birth to a son, and you shall call him Ishmael," meaning God hears. For the faithful one has heard of your abuse. Hagar's and Ishmael's lives are important, too important to risk their death in the desert. Hagar goes back, her child is born, and grows up in the safety of Abraham's household. Then, Abraham and Sarah have a child together, Isaac. We can read throughout the biblical story of Abraham that God had planned all along to have Isaac be the ancestor of the Jewish people. And then Ishmael, the ancestor of another nation. In Genesis chapter 21, God reveals the plan for Ishmael. This is after Hagar and Ishmael have been sent away by Abraham and Sarah, who cannot conceive of the half-brothers Ishmael and Isaac to grow up in harmony and friendship together. Again, Hagar finds herself in dire circumstances in the desert. She fears for the life of her son and herself, for they ran out of water. God says to Hagar, "Come, lift up the boy and hold him fast with your hand, for I will make a great nation of him." Then God opened her eyes, and she saw a well of water. She went and filled the skin with water and gave the boy a drink. God was with the boy, and he grew up. He lived in the wilderness and became an expert with the bow. He lived in the wilderness of Paran, and his mother got a wife for him from the land of Egypt. Out of the line of Isaac comes David, hero of the Jewish faith, and Jesus, the central figure in Christianity. Ishmael is, according to tradition, the forefather of Muhammad, the prophet of Islam. These three faiths are called Abrahamic faiths because all of us trace our ancestry back to our forefather Abraham. And now people could start arguing, of course, and try to find out who's the best, the most like descendant of Abraham, the more worthy faith in the eyes of God. And many people did just that over history. But the question is, how much does that matter to God? God does not judge children on the purity of their parents' relationships. To the contrary, one could argue that God decidedly prefers foster children like Moses, children of slaves like Ishmael, second-borns like Jacob, children conceived out of wedlock like Jesus. We have such a focus on genetic inheritance and legally sanctioned relationships, but God really does not. Please note that Jesus' heritage is traced through his earthly father Joseph and not his mother Mary and his godly father, who does not have a line like a human father would. So this is not really about genetic science, is it? No, it is more about belonging. Human relationships in the Bible are messy, and people with power are as prone to abuse that power as they are today. But God protects and uplifts these children born in dire circumstances, makes them resilient, helps them grow, and leads them to their callings in God's name. In the case of Ishmael, this might be hard for us to understand. Did God really bless the line which leads to the Islamic faith just the same way God blessed the line of David, the line of Jesus? The story of Abraham, Sarah, Hagar, Ishmael, and Isaac can be understood this way. We're all related. We're all part of the same family tree. The question is rather, why did Abraham and Sarah, the ones in power in that household, why did they decide to send Ishmael away instead of raising Ishmael and Isaac together? After all, it was their decision to bring Ishmael into this world. How could they abandon the child? It would have been their responsibility to raise him in love and with care. Hagar, who did not have a choice in this matter, she is the one to take responsibility for Ishmael, to love and protect him to the best of her ability. And God sees her. God acknowledges Hagar's pain and suffering and sacrifice. God appears to Hagar in the desert twice, protects her, guides her. She is the first to see God and live. Here. So Hagar named the living God who spoke to her, "You are El Roi," for she said, "Have I really seen God and remained alive after seeing God?" This is huge. Such an important encounter. Such a revelation of God's nature, God who protects the vulnerable, God who rewards those who show resiliency and compassion, God who chooses to show God's self to a woman of color who is enslaved. Now the question is, if God put so much attention on Hagar, why don't we? Why is the story of Hagar not a standard part of our lectionary? If there's ever a story of delivery, it is the one in Genesis 21. Why is it not part of the stories we read at the Easter Vigil, for example? Is it because we put more attention on human hierarchies than God does? Do we think Isaac is more worthy than Ishmael because he is the child of a free woman and Ishmael is the child of a slave? Do we feel more connected to Isaac because his line leads to the birth of Christianity and Ishmael's line leads to the birth of Islam? If followers of all three Abrahamic faiths believe in the same God, belong to the same family, what does that mean for the way we view Islam? What does it mean for our interfaith relationships? These are important questions to ponder in this time of Advent, this time of waiting, growing, and expecting. It is a time of wonder, a time where miracles of new insights can and will occur. Let us open our hearts and minds to God, who sees us, who hears us in all the challenges we might face today. Never are we alone. Always is God at our side. Amen.